Hello, everybody. Time for another episode of Coins with Clutch. I'm your host, Chris Clutch. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Hopefully, you caught my other videos regarding the penny. This video, we're going to get into the nickel. Okay, different varieties of nickels out there. I started collecting nickels most recently. Kind of was pretty interested in the earlier nickels. And it's got a very great story behind each and every one of them. So sit back, enjoy. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do so. It would be greatly appreciated. And enjoy. Before the nickel as we knew it as a 5-cent piece, there were silver 3-cent pieces called trimes that were in circulation from 1851 to 1873. They were rather light. They only weighed about 0.8 grams, and they're composed of 75% silver and 25% copper. The public, as you would imagine, hoarded these coins because they were, in fact, 75% silver. So the U.S. Mint circulated nickel 3-cent pieces from 1865 to 1889, and then composed of 75% copper and 25% nickel. And they weighed a little more. They were 1.94 grams. Simultaneously, there was also the shield nickel, and this actually was the 5-cent nickel as we come to know it. The shield nickel was made possible by the Act of May 16th, 1866, had the same composition as the nickel 3-cent piece that was authorized in 1865, and the obverse design was similar to that of a 2-cent coin. It was made of 75% copper, 25% nickel, and it actually weighed a little more. It actually weighed 5 grams, which 5 grams is the actual weight of most of your nickels, if not all. As mentioned, the United States' first type of the 5-cent nickel was the shield nickel, was minted for nearly 20 years, starting in 1866. But by the early 1880s, it was time for a change, and in 1883, a new design debuted. The new coin was designed by Charles Barber, chief engraver of the U.S. Mint. On the front of the coin, Barber used a profile portrait of Miss Liberty wearing a diadem, an ornamental headband similar to a small crown placed over the forehead. On the reverse, he put a large Roman numeral 5, as you can see, to signify 5 cents. That was in the center of a wreath. More than 5 million of the 1883 coins were minted without the word cents in the design. This was because con men actually gold plated some of the coins to spend them as $5 gold pieces. Both the coins were about the same size. When the Mint officials learned of this later in the year, they added the word cents to discourage any confusion over the new coins. Production continued, and through the end of 1883, another 16 million nickels were minted with the correction. The same Liberty Head obverse hubs and masters were used on all Liberty Head nickels from 1883 all the way to 1913. And as you can see, I have some of the dates here. I'm missing a couple of the 1890s. And there's your 1900s. During the course of the series, 3 different reverse styles were used. In 1900 and 1901, there was some tweaking of the hub dies for certain denominations, resulting in small adjustments to relief and certain details. In the Liberty Head Nickel series, a new reverse hub was made and some very slight differences from the older one, most obviously the lengthening of the leaves above the top of each side of the V. Those were very minute details. From 1883 to 1911, all nickels were produced at the Philadelphia Mint without any mint marks. In 1912, they were minted in Philadelphia and San Francisco with the S mint mark to the left of the word cents, and in Denver with a D mint mark. The last year of official mintage was 1912. It was later discovered that 5 unofficial Liberty Head nickels were secretly minted with the date 1913. And as you can see, 1912, 1912D, and I will zoom in. There's the mint mark there, right underneath that dot. And the 1912 S is missing. As you can see, it is it is a key date, very low mintage. Only 238,000 were minted that year. The Buffalo nickel, also known as the Bison or Indian head nickel, was designed by James Fraser, whose initial F appears below the date. The profile on the obverse is a composite of 3 Native American men who posed for the designer. According to conventional but incorrect wisdom, the American bison on the reverse was modeled after a bison named Black Diamond in the New York Central Park Zoo. A few months after the Buffalo nickel was introduced into circulation, rapid and obvious wear on the words 5 cent brought about a modification of the original design. The mound on which the words were placed was flattened out to a straight line. The denomination was placed on the recessed area beneath it. Some of the details on the Indian and the bison were also removed. This created 2 varieties of the 1913 nickel for each of the 3 mints. And as you can see, they had a 1913 raised ground, they had a 1913 ground and recessed, and then each one for Denver Mint and San Francisco Mint. So this one currently has a line above the word 5 cent, so that is called ground in recess. And that is what each of the Buffalo nickels after 1913 look like. Buffalo nickels were struck nearly every year from 1913 to 1938. As you can see, there's 1919. I got some 20s here. All right. And then there's late 20s up until the 30s in 1937. From 1916 through 1920, the mints produced Buffalo nickels in large numbers. And you can see the mintage there. Then from 1921, a recession set in and production of copper, nickel, and silver coins, except for dollars, which were subject to special legislation, slowed as well. Beginning in 1934, mintage became generous again, reaching a high for the denomination of 118,997,000 in 1936. And as you can see, the mintage numbers after 1919 fell. Then they rose back up again. And then again in 1930s. Production took place at each of the 3 active mints, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. In 1931, only the San Francisco mint struck nickels, so 1931 S. In 1938, nickels were coined only in Denver, right there, 1938 D. No Buffalo nickels were produced in 1922, 1932, or 1933. Buffalo nickel varieties include the 1914 4/3, the 1918 D 8/7, the 1935 double die reverse, the 1936 D with 3.5 legs, the 1937 D 3-legged version, and the 1938 D/S. The mint mark S for San Francisco, D for Denver, no mint mark for Philadelphia, is located just below the word 5 cent. And as you can see, I'll zoom in. Here's an example. There is the D for Denver, and there's the S for San Francisco. In 1938, when the Indian head Buffalo nickel had used up its 25-year minimum legal lifespan, there was a big rush to get rid of the design. Actually, for a long time, it had been unloved by the several mints due to the near impossibility of getting them to strike up properly and the pesky problem of die breakage. Felix Slage won a public competition for the coins design with his model of President Thomas Jefferson in Jefferson's home, Monticello. He actually won $1,000 for the contest, and that was a lot of money back in that day. Schlage's bold portrait of Jefferson was retained with modifications to the lettering style. but his depiction of Monticello, a corner view of the building accompanied by foliage, was rejected. This was changed to a direct or plain view of the building with no foliage. Unlike some other designs and designers, Schlag's initials would not appear on the nickel until 1966. In early 1939, the Mint made a minor modification to the reverse hub. The steps on Monticello, which presented striking difficulties, were strengthened. Collectors are attentive to this strike detail, and full steps or FS strikes are desired. So as we go through these, something that I look for on every nickel, especially 1970 and earlier on the Monticellos, is to make sure that it has a full set of stairs. And they would show up right here. There would be 6 distinct lines that go across. And if you had the full set of stairs, those are very desirable. In 1942, the element nickel became crucial for the war effort, requiring a mid-year change in composition to the 5-cent piece. Nickels produced from 1942 through 1945 are made of an alloy of copper, silver, and manganese, with the 1942 Philadelphia and Denver coins also being struck in the traditional composition prior to the change. The mint mark, including the mint mark P for Philadelphia for the first time on a U.S. coin, in order to distinguish wartime silver nickels made in Philadelphia from those made previously. In 1946, the nickel's original alloy was restored, and the mint mark D for Denver, S for San Francisco, no mint mark for Philadelphia, was returned to its previous size and locations. So, up until this point, the mint marks were located to the right of the Monticello building. So you can see D for Denver, S for San Francisco. Then in 1942, there was a regular Monticello that was minted, and then World War II happened. Then they changed the composition to 35% silver. So these silver nickels are highly sought after, okay, because they do compose of silver. And the difference you could tell of a wartime silver nickel also is the mint mark. As you can see, this is a 1943 wartime nickel. You flip it over, it has a P for Philadelphia mint mark. It's the only nickel with the P mint mark up until this point. And then there's the D for Denver mint mark, S for San Francisco mint mark. And as you can see, going up until 1945, they continued to be silver. And then in 1946, they reverted back to the nickel, and the mint mark went back to the original position to the right of the Monticello building. The designer's initials, FS, were added below the bust starting in 1966, and you can see right there, FS. Dies were further remodeled to strengthen the design in 1971, 1972, 1977, and 1982. The reverse of 1971, used through 1976, possesses sharp, though thin, steps. This reverse does not seem prone to bridges between the steps. Because of these thin steps, cuts and nicks can mark an otherwise full step coin. The 6th step, when present, is always very thin. So my general rule of thumb is I always look for full steps before a 1970 coin, because after 1970, the steps and they become more prevalent because they change the die on that. Okay. The reverse of 1982 was used until 1987, after which it was engraved, with subsequent touch-ups and re-engraving since. The steps are sharper than the reverse of 1977, and a modification of 1989 and later made them even bolder. The 1982 through 1986 issues show progressive master hub wear, resulting in more poorly defined steps. After 1986, the mint maintained the hub often enough that 5 and 6 steps coins are easy to find. So the later you get into date, the more easier it is to find a 5 or 6 steps on the Monticello building. The mint mark position S for San Francisco, and D for Denver, no mint mark for Philadelphia, was moved to the obverse at the right base of the bust of Jefferson starting in 1968. So as you can see, here's an example in 1964. The Denver mint mark was still previously to the right of the Monticello building. But starting in 1968, the mint mark got moved down here in between the bust of Jefferson and the date. At this time, appropriate mint marks were hand punched to the dies of the Philadelphia Mint. During this operation, the exact position of the mint mark occasionally varied to some degree. One extreme exception is that on some coins in 1975 D, where the D is located near the date. This variation has a premium value. As you can see, 1975 D. And the D is located near the date. Actually, this is considered a normal one. The one that they're talking about that's near the date would be more up here, closer to the date. By 2003, the Jefferson nickel with portrait obverse and Monticello reverse had been minted continuously for more than 60 years. The basic design had remained the same, with a few modifications along the way, and the addition of the FS initials in 1966. The time was ripe for a change. The American 5-cent Coin Continuity Act of 2003 provided for 5 special reverses to be used on Jefferson nickels in 2004, 2005, and 2006 to observe the bicentennial of the Lewis and Clark travels, referred to as the Westward Journey issue. (2004) issues used a mostly unchanged obverse paired with 2 different reverses, the piece metal and the keelboat reverse. (2005) saw a new obverse portrait paired with 2 new reverses, American Bison and Oceans in View. In 2006, the classic forward-facing Monticello reverse returned in 2006 and was paired with yet another new obverse portrait. This design continued to today. The mint mark positions S for San Francisco, D for Denver, P for Philadelphia are all located on the obverse at the right base of the bust of Jefferson. Well, hopefully you got some good information regarding the nickel. As you can see, there's many different varieties. There was the early Liberty V nickels, the Buffalo nickels, your older Jefferson nickels. Don't forget about your wartime nickels that were composed of 35% silver, and then your most recent nickels along with your Westward Journey, Lewis and Clark bicentennial nickels of 2004 and 2005. I hope you found this informative. Stay tuned. I'll be doing a loose change episode with some nickels. I have a couple rolls of nickels that we'll go through. I'll actually get through 2 rolls because they actually are a lot quicker than going through rolls of pennies. So again, thank you for joining my YouTube channel. If you're not following me on TikTok, you can swing over there. I'm at CM Clutch on TikTok. And everyone have a blessed day. Thank you.